Rome, 100 AD. 1 million people living in a single city, the first city in world history to reach that size. No refrigeration, no trains, no trucks, no way to grow enough wheat within 100 miles to feed them. So how did Rome not starve? The answer is one of the most sophisticated logistics operations the ancient world ever built, and understanding it explains why the empire eventually collapsed too. A city of 1 million people needed roughly 400,000 tons of staple food a year, grain making up about half of that. Italy's own farmland couldn't come close to producing enough, especially once you account for how much labour Rome had pulled into its army and bureaucracy instead of agriculture. So Rome did what any economy does when local supply can't meet demand. It imported at a scale nobody had attempted before. This wasn't casual trade, it was a state-managed supply chain spanning multiple provinces. According to the Roman Jewish historian Josephus, North Africa alone could feed Rome for roughly 8 months of an average year, with Egypt covering the remaining 4. Grain ships sailed on fixed seasonal schedules, timed around the Mediterranean's wind patterns, moving hundreds of tons per voyage. Losing a single fleet to storms could mean real shortages in the capital, which is exactly why control over these grain-producing provinces became one of the most politically sensitive assets in the empire. Whoever controlled the wheat supply had enormous leverage over a city of 1 million hungry citizens. Here's where it gets interesting economically. Rome didn't just import grain, it gave much of it away. The Cura Annoni, the grain dole, provided subsidized or free wheat to roughly 200,000 citizens at its peak. Modern readers often call this an ancient welfare state, and functionally it was. But politically, it operated more like patronage. Emperors who kept the grain flowing kept the city calm, and emperors who let supply falter faced unrest. This created a strange dynamic. The government became economically dependent on maintaining an import and distribution system so large that any disruption became a political crisis, not just an economic one. This system had a structural weakness that took centuries to matter. It made Rome's food security dependent on the political stability of provinces across the sea. When the Western Empire fractured and naval control of the Mediterranean became contested, those supply lines became vulnerable. The Vandal conquest of North Africa in the 430s cut off the single most important supply line feeding the Western grain dole, and historians point to it as one of the critical economic blows that made the Western Empire's political collapse effectively irreversible. A city that had built its entire food economy on imported grain had no fallback once the shipping lanes were severed. This pattern isn't unique to Rome. Any economy that solves a local supply shortage by relying heavily on long-distance imports takes on a hidden fragility. Modern supply chain shocks, from semiconductor shortages to energy dependency to food import reliance in parts of the Gulf, follow the same basic logic. Rome may be the first large-scale case study in what happens when a major economy externalizes its most essential resource. Rome fed 1 million people for centuries using nothing but ships, seasons, and political control over a handful of provinces. And when that system cracked, so did the city's stability. Next time we'll look at how the Silk Road actually worked and why it was never really one road at all. Subscribe if you want to keep tracing how ancient economies really worked.